Hello to you all, I'm Phil Liggett, joined as ever by Paul Sherwin, 7 times a rider in the Tour de France, and we're going to bring to you today World Cycling Productions edition of the 54th Circuit of Het Volk, a race which really is seen as the opening classic of the year. And Paul, the weather as always pretty disastrous. It's that sort of weather in Belgium in February. The favourite on the day is Frank van den Broek, and 193 riders taking the start this morning. The course pretty typical, Paul, of Flanders. We take in the few small hills, including the famous Muur de Grammont, and the riders themselves finding the cobbles rather slippery.
It's always a very difficult race, Het Volk, because at the start of the season you never do know what the weather is going to be like. Many of these riders have been preparing for the season in warmer climes in southern Spain and even in south of France, and when they come up here, in the past this race has been dogged by bad weather, especially on a couple of years. In fact, the race was cancelled because of snow, and certainly today Het Volk is living up to its reputation of being a very difficult start to the season.
A very important race, of course, for the Belgian riders, anxious to prove they are kings of the castle in their own domain. And André Schmil, now riding for Lotto, and very much a Belgian now, having tried a little bit of being Russian, and he's lived some time in France as well, but he's now a naturalised Belgian rider, so his Lotto team will try to get him home today. But the red-hot favourite, Frank van den Broek. Anyway, these are the riders. Let's now go back to the start earlier today in the square, and a huge crowd turning out in Ghent, this cycling mecca for many, many visiting cyclists from throughout the world, where all their careers begin. There's Frank van den Broek, the red-hot favourite, people talking about him as the new Eddy Merckx.
Definitely, he's already got 2 victories under his belt this morning, but everyone's expecting to see a good ride by this man, Johan Museeuw. And his favourite lieutenant, Wilfred Peters, he's a great man as well, he's up there. And interesting to see the big change this winter, Axel Merckx. Last year was on Team Polti, today he's riding for Mappé. And Leon van Bonde, 2nd place in the World Championships last year, always a man to look out for in these early Belgian classics.
Franco Ballerini, we often talk about him as the man of the classics. He is so consistent, winner of Paris-Roubaix last year for the 2nd time, and that's still to come, of course, but this will be valuable preparation because there's plenty of cobblestones over the route today as well, which by the way is over 202 kilometres. Not too far for riders of this calibre. A nice gentle walk into the season, I think. Huge crowd.
André Schmil coming to sign in now that he is a Belgian. He's started to gain a certain amount of popularity. There was a big rivalry several years ago between Schmil, then a Russian, and Johan Museeuw, who in fact was always a Belgian.
And there is the current champion of Belgium for the 2nd year, in fact, Tom Steels. And if it comes down to a sprint, few will get the better of him. Peter van Petegem, winner for the last 2 years of this event, looking for his hat-trick.
Well, the race goes right through his back garden because every big race in Belgium goes through a town called Brakel. And in fact, it's not very far away from there that Peter van Petegem hails from. But the race is off, and it will have been blessed this morning by the Bishop of Ghent, because he's always there to bless this as the first real bicycle race in Belgium of any new season.
And perhaps, Paul, blessed not the right word, but the doping vampires of the UCI paid their traditional visit at the crack of dawn this morning, testing teams, Rabobank, TVM and La Française des Jeux, all for the use of EPO, and I'm afraid that's a sign of the times now after the controversy which started with Festina in last year's Tour de France. So a torrid season perhaps in world cycling this year.
It certainly is. The big attacks coming very early on, and in fact always Mappé, and again Wilfred Peters. Wilfred Peters, although a great lieutenant for men like Johan Museeuw, is turning out to be a great rider in his own right, and he wants to really put the cat amongst the pigeons and get this race really difficult before we get to the first climbs. But Phil, over the last couple of years, with the change to the finish in Lokeren, I feel that they've compacted the climbs in Het Volk a little bit too early on, and there's a big flat section before you ride from the final climbs up to the finish in Lokeren, and that gives everybody a chance to get back on.
Well, that's true. In fact, 50 kilometres to go. The hills are all behind the riders, and so it probably leans a little bit towards the big sprinters, but you never know because conditions today are a bit miserable. Apart from being wet, it's quite cold. These are 3 survivors of a break of some 8, and it's all that's left of them now as they try to hold off the race field behind, but they're closing in very quickly.
It's a very difficult section of cobbles called the Volkenhemberg. The three leaders are Vermoot, Roesems and Moreni. They had a very big lead, but you can see once you get to the strategic part, the general impetus which is coming to the front of the main field, especially being set by Team Mapei here, will bring those riders back in the fold quite rapidly indeed. And I think everybody at the side of the road who's turned out in these awful weather conditions are looking to see just how Johan Museeuw is going to perform here, because it's almost a year since he was thrown to the ground in Paris-Roubaix and broke his kneecap and got that terrible infection which almost cost him his life. And it's amazing to see him back in the sport, racing again with a great amount of dedication.
Well, Frank van den Broek was a rider on Mapei, but now of course he's switched over to Cofidis, and his teammates will be working against him today. They're perhaps thinking of a more important man on their team, the return of Johan Museeuw, anxious to prove to everybody after that horrendous crash in the forest of Arenberg last year in the Paris-Roubaix. He is now fully recovered, and it was a terrible time for him. There was at one stage his leg became infected after the crash, and there was talk of him having his leg amputated, and perish the thought. But he's worked very hard this winter, Paul. He looks very sharp. He looks very sharp, very keen indeed. I think one of the most important things for Johan Museeuw was, in fact, his wife trained as a nurse, and she was the one who encouraged him to go to hospital. He was actually saying, oh, I'll wait until the following morning. And if it hadn't been for his wife calling up the doctor in the middle of the night, it may well have been a very sad end to the story of Johan Museeuw and that infection. Well, let's see how he gets on. It's a big test time for Johan, because he will be thinking of another victory in the Tour of Flanders, and will he ride or will he not ride the upcoming Paris-Roubaix? Because he openly admits now he is afraid of the cobblestones and the many crashes which are sure to ensue in that Queen of the Classic races. Now these three leaders, Paul, be slowly being wound in here as we look now at number 48, and that is Steve Vermoot, a Belgian rider on the Flandern 2002 team, and the other rider there, number 93, that is Bert Roesems. He rides for Tony Steiner Colnago. Well, Vlaanderen 2002 is a very good team. It's actually supported by the Belgian Flemish government, and the idea is to encourage riders into the sport of professional cycling. And very often what happens is the team manager there develops riders into good professional riders, and they go on to bigger teams. So it's kind of a Belgian farm school for the riders of the future of this country. And good to see too, because they have presented us with some good riders that have been passed on to other teams as well. Well, the lead was over 7 minutes, and there were more of them, but they've slowly been thinned out to this breakaway. We've gone over the Old Quaremont some time ago now, and the conditions, well, as you can see, they are very, very typically Belgian. And I used to remember, Paul, when I raced in Belgium, I think it was a new pair of socks every day, because the weather and the mud just tore the socks to shreds. Well, you can see the conditions there. These roads just wind their way through what are very open farm fields, which is why the racing in Belgium is so difficult. There are no hedgerows, there are no trees, and what happens is the wind comes blasting across these fields and makes it very difficult to race in these conditions. And you can see in the main field the pressure's certainly on at the front. This is Philippe Gaumont, who rides now alongside Frank van den Broek, who changed this winter to come across to the French Cofidis team. He's at the front, putting a lot of pressure on, because they realise now that they're trying to toughen the race up and eliminate as many riders from behind over these sections of cobblestones. And moving up into second, third place there, in fact, is Tom Steels, the Belgian champion, always omnipresent. This is the kind of race a man like Steels could win, because Steels, if there's a group of 15 or 20 riders left at the finish, there's not many riders going to beat him in the sprint. Well, I tell you what, these guys are just about hanging up the front here, but there's a lot of racing being done behind now for this time of the year. They're obviously pretty confident in Cofidis that if they can get Frank van den Broek back up to the head, then he might do something good in this race right at the start of the season. He's had a little bit of an interesting sort of warm-up. He spent some time in Mallorca training, and he's had one or two silly crashes, and he doesn't seem to be the best of bike handlers, I'll have to say that about him. But then, of course, he is only 24 years of age. Certainly is, but he comes from a very big cycling history. His brother, his uncle Jean-Luc, in fact, is the team manager for the Lotto squad, and in fact his first professional team was Lotto, but there ended up being a bit of family friction there, and he left halfway through a season and went to join Johan Museeuw with the big Mapei squad. And then he seems to have fallen out with Mapei and switched across this winter to come across to the French Cofidis team, who are looking for some way of proving that they are one of the big teams in the world. They've had an awful lot of bad luck. They signed up Fondriest, who
ended up having a year full of injury. Then they signed up Tony Rominger, who crashed out of the Tour de France with a broken collarbone, and obviously they'd also signed up Lance Armstrong just before Lance was diagnosed with testicular cancer. So now, with Frank van den Broek, Cofidis have a lot of hopes that they will pull themselves to the top rankings of the world teams.
Well, the masked man of the 3 here is Christian Marini. He was the one rider we did mention to you a little bit earlier on. But the 3 of them are still working together. They look pretty tired to me. Flashing through the frame there is Max van Heeswijk, old mate of Paul Sherwin's, actually, when they were together on the Motorola team. Max was the rider, by the way. Paul was the public relations officer.
Most people couldn't tell the difference. They thought I still looked so fit. But I'll tell you one thing, Max van Heeswijk is a very good rider, and he's again another of the big changes this winter. He was on the Rabobank team, the Dutch team, which is looked after by Jan Raas, and he came across this winter to take part in the Mapei team. And I think Max is a man who will actually grow a lot more with this big strong Mapei squad, and I can see him winning several races this year.
Well, he's having a little dig here now to try and liven up and get some interest in the chase down of these 3 up front, so they can get on with the serious stuff. There's no way these 3 riders will survive to the end. They've seen their breakaway reduce steadily, not just in time but in numbers as well. These short stab climbs are hurting the riders in that breakaway, and we've caught the odd glimpse too of the face of people like Christian Marini, and I think he might be rather welcoming the capture, which won't be that far away.
But Max has already had 1 victory so far this year, a stage of the Tour of the Mediterranean. He is a very good sprinter, but the kind of sprinter who needs an uphill finish. And I think as he develops, because Max is not that older rider, 26 years of age, came into the sport after a very good start in BMX racing, and also was a black belt in karate.
In other words, don't mess about with him in the sprint, I would think. Remember how he got away and won that stage in the Tour of Spain? I think it's 2 years ago now. He jumped away, everybody thinking Max was a sprinter. He really did outwit them, jumped with about a kilometre to go and hung on to win the stage. He'll always win races, Max will. He's that sort of bike rider, and now on a team like Mapei, with a lot of strength around them, we might well see him having a great season. But at the moment, he's trying to get a reaction going from the chase.
This is the great thing about Team Mapei. Nearly every one of the riders on the start line for Mapei this morning has a great chance of winning this event, which is why they can put so much pressure on a field like this. You can see now TVM also coming up to the front to keep the pressure on this main field. On every small incline, the teams are trying to split it apart. TVM today obviously working for their favourite Peter van Petegem, the man who doesn't live very far away from this course today. In fact, this course, the Het Volk, zigzags all around the southern parts of Ghent in the climbs like the Old Quaremont, the Mur de Grammont, which is very strange to see riders going up that so early on in the season.
Well, people like Van Petegem, of course, they train over those climbs almost daily, and so they know them intimately. They begin to feel they own them, and they really do get upset when other riders try to get first over the top. And I think it's a big inspiration for the Belgians. But TVM doing a fine piece of pacemaking. It looks poor with Mapei, TVM and Cofidis. They carry the 3 favourites on their teams to take the race out, and clearly they've been told to go and chase these 3 down.
Certainly that is the order that's come through. The order of the day is to pull back that lead, that group. There's a good picture there of one of the Cofidis riders who's come across, rode for Lotto last year. That's Peter Farazijn, a very good friend of Frank van den Broek. And there, in fact, you can see, Phil, they're starting to pull them back into the fold.
Yeah, that's one of the early riders who was Bray, the Palmans rider, and I can't tell you his name, but as we watch here now, Van den Broek has coolly come to the front and begin to accelerate. This man looks pretty cool right now. Got a little goatee beard this year as he starts to stamp on those pedals that bit harder. The Palmans rider is one of the early members of the breakaway, so he's back, which the 3 leaders, as far as we know, are still out front.
Van den Broek showing a lot of class there. 2 victories so far under his belt this season. He's only been a professional since 1995, and already he's got a lot of victories under his belt. He's a great rider and still just 24 years of age, Phil. It seems as if he's been around forever.
It is often the case with these young riders who make good so early on. He started out life with his uncle's team, Lotto, Jean-Luc Van den Broek, the manager there, but they didn't get on. Often their families are like that. And so Frankie went off and made his own way in Mapei. Now he's with Cofidis. But everybody has agreed this man has a lot of natural talent and should go places. Farazijn, the Cofidis man, tacked on the back, as Paul has said. And they're trying to get a group going here now. The other man, of course, we keep on forgetting about, at least I do, is the Lotto team leader André Schmil, riding very well again this year.
Schmil is a great rider for conditions like this. He's getting on in life. He's well over 30 years of age now, but these tough conditions really do suit him. He's a strong man. He was brought up in the former Soviet Union racing team, and when the going gets tough, you can expect Andre Schmil to come to the front. There was a bit of a quack there, they call that in Belgium. That was Joe Plancart looking the wrong way, and one of the young riders from the new Crédit Agricole colours coming through there. I think that would be Stuart O'Grady, because O'Grady himself really excels in these tough early season classics.
Yeah, like you call him a young rider, but I guess he is, Paul, having just returned from Australia with him, because we were in the Tour Down Under. I was the commentator, of course. He was the winner of the race, and what a marvellous occasion that was for Stuart O'Grady. The new Tour Down Under in Adelaide, replacing at last, the Adelaide people will tell you, the Formula One Grand Prix, which they lost to their rivals Melbourne. And the replacement, I tell you, is taken the place by storm. 750,000 spectators over 5 days, and O'Grady, after being appointed the ambassador to the organisation, played the ambassador role by winning the race as well. Now,
I do believe, Phil, that in fact there was no confusion at all of deciding whether you were the commentator and he was the rider.
Thank you, Paul, very nice of you. That was the breakaway. We just saw Bert Roosland's on the front, but now we're going back to a little organisation here. Now O'Grady, we know, has the form because of his great riding in the Tour Down Under. He's going to try and come over here with a little bit. He's joined by his Aussie mate Robin McEwen, who was very bitter at the fact that Rabobank made him go across to the team presentation in Holland rather than allow him to ride in that Tour Down Under in his own country. And the same applied to Pat Jonker, also a member of the Rabobank team. And Pat, to even make matters worse, lives in Adelaide and couldn't even ride that new event. So Rabobank made them go back home, and now they're together here trying to get something going.
Some serious boys moving across to this breakaway as well, Phil. Tristan Hoffman is the TVM rider in the group there, and also Lars Mikkelsen riding just in front there for the Française des Jeux, but they're not going to let them get too clear from the front, and a lot of organisation coming to the front of the main field. But you can see these are the conditions that Belgian bike racing is all about. The rain is coming down, the roads are dirty, and you're going through real sodden fields, and after the bad weather we've had over this last week, it really has put a lot of filth onto the roads, and at the end of this day a lot of riders are going to spend a long time in the showers trying to get clean.
Well, it's better to be in a little breakaway than in the middle of this lot, I think, because the spray off the wheels and the constant nervous tension as you try to dodge the slippery corners or the roads running away.
There's Joe Plancart on the right hand side there. Moving up very close to the front of this main field was Johan Museo in third place. So big Johan looks very much as if he's back in great shape, because he's riding right at the front of this main field. He knows this race intimately. All of these Belgian riders will have ridden and trained over these cobblestone sections during the winter, which is why they come to the front at the right time.
Well, the pressure on at the front, and we're into the last 30 kilometres of racing here, where the hills are now behind these riders as they try to sort out the attacks. But it's interesting to see some of the names that are coming up there, like Enrico Cassani from the Polti team. I never expected to see him. There's big Magnus Backstedt going through for Crédit Agricole. Remember, all the GAM boys now riding in the new colours, which took effect after last year's Tour de France, and it looks as though that may be Schmil gone clear.
Well, that looks like one of the Lotto riders. In fact, it looks very much like Schmil, and chasing him straight away, Stefan de Jong from TVM. The big rivalry, I think, as you've said, Phil, in this race today is Lotto against TVM against Cofidis. And I would think Cofidis is slightly the weaker team, because they've only got one or two strong riders to help Frank van den Broek when it comes down to the finale here. And Bert Dietz is the rider for the Nürburgring team there. He's wearing number 131 with the blue jersey. Keep getting a quick sight of him there.
Well, Nürburgring had a good start to their season too, racing in South Africa. They got a couple of stage wins there with Jürgen Werner, and now it looks as though Bert Dietz, who's come across to the Nürburgring team, has been up in the front quite a bit. There he is, his second wheel at the moment as well, on the back of the TVM boys. And a few riders are sort of shouting at each other now, because they've actually lost the momentum again, and once you sense the losing of the momentum, it is time to put in an attack, and this looks like Wilfried Peters having a go.
There's Wilfried Peters once again putting the pressure on, but big coverage there, as you said, by the Nürburgring team from Germany, getting across. They're always putting men across, and again it's Dietz trying to look for that move.
Leon Van Bon joining Peters. Now these are strong boys. Van Bon is a man for the classics, and in many ways he's a man who snicks many good stages. I remember his 2 victories in the much lost, lamented Tour du Pont in America, and since then, of course, as Paul said earlier, he's had a silver medal in the World Championships, and if he'd have read his sprint right, he might have been the world champion.
It's a good move here again. Very interested to note that Joe Plancart has been very much to the front over the last few moments. He's always looking to cover these moves. That Planckaert going through in first position there. It is good to see now that there's a big chance for the Lotto squad. In the past, Lotto was always counting just on one man, André Schmil, when it came to the classics, and now they've got a two-pronged attack because Joe Planckaert, I think this year, is going to develop into a first-class classics rider. Again, the attack's coming, and once again it's Rabobank. Rabobank are in excellent form this year. They've had a very good start to the season. This is Martin Den Bakker, a former champion of Holland, trying to get clear, and now it looks as if they've broken the stranglehold. But you can see, Phil, again, Lotto putting a man across there, and again it looks like André Schmil is looking for the breakaway group today, obviously not confident of staying in the main field for the sprint.
Well, I tell you what, this the way they're attacking now, sooner or later the elastic is going to snap. There's still a little wind blowing, it's keeping the riders in action. There's Planckaert, his big claim to fame up until now was second in Paris-Roubaix, which he did back in 1997, and the super fast Paris Tours last year he finished 8th in that, but right now he's going to have to rethink his tactics.
The weather's bad, it really is starting to come down again, and it's cold out there as well, around about 8 degrees centigrade, which doesn't get very high in the Fahrenheit scale either. Again, Den Bakker picking up the pace, trying to put a Rabobank man off the front there. Every time it slows down at the moment, there's somebody's got the courage to go off the front, try and keep the pressure up, because this race is nearly always these days decided by a breakaway, despite the fact that there's a long way to go to the finish line from the final climbs, and Den Bakker here, Phil, has opened himself up a very good gap, but it's a long way to go riding on your own, because the wind at the moment is predominantly coming from the front, which is why it's such a laboured style you can see here on Martin Den Bakker.
Well, he looks pretty good to me, ex-champion of Holland, but there's another attack launched down the backside. That looks like Van Petegem maybe forcing himself back into the action, because Cofidis have marked him very sharply, and they, in fact, the field here now trying to put the strong men up front, and the rest could be out of it here. Team Home, Jack and Jones, who had a great tour down under, finishing second with Jesper Skibby in that one. Skibby riding out his final season of a long career. Back to the three leaders. We'd almost forgotten about them, hadn't we? And they now look to be in a little bit of trouble on the steep cobbles here.
This is the Molenberg that they're going up now, and you can see these guys have been at the front of the race for so long. They don't have a whole lot of force left in their legs now as they suffer to get up this climb, and once the main field gets here, Phil, they're really going to fly up this hill, and they will eat away at the lead of these three men.
Well, the old Claremont was the launching pad for the original breakaway, and that's a really steep and bitter climb in conditions like this. Many riders forced to walk in the peloton, and they've been away ever since, conquering the bergs of Flanders. Their gap at one stage was 8 minutes. It's slowly come down now. They're barely 2 minutes in front, and we haven't got any time checks today on our screens, which is unusual, but they're definitely coming back, and judging by the fact they're losing their rhythm now as well, and sitting on the back here, not looking too happy at all, Steve Vermoet from Flanders in 2002.
I think these three guys now realise that their breakaway has been one of those suicide breakaways to get some publicity for the sponsor, and they know that very shortly they're going to have all the big guns of this year's Het Volk breathing down their neck, coming into what is going to be the crucial stages when the big attacks really start to come thick and fast. But these three guys have put a great performance in to stay off the front on a race like this, because despite the fact that they went out very early on and built up that massive lead, over the last few kilometres it's been quite difficult pulling it back. But you can see, Phil, it's almost obvious the difference in the speed with the main field and our three leaders.
And the TVM boys are driving now, so Van Petegem quite clearly the winner for the past 2 years, told his guys, I feel good, so let's chase these three down and leave ourselves with enough time to work out how we're going to deal with the closing kilometres. So the TVM boys have been told to get to the front and start driving back on those three riders out front. But remember, nationwide coverage in Belgium today for this. There's a sharp right hand turn coming up now as we start the climb on the Molenberg for the bunch, so the gap is not that big, Paul.
It certainly isn't that big. It was almost a bunch sprint to get into the corner there first, and it wasn't TVM at all. In fact, it was the men from Mapei who went round the corner there in first position.
You're right, it's the dirt. It looks like dirty grey TVM jerseys. They've changed the colours this year, TVM. I'm not convinced I actually like the design, but I have to say that it certainly looked TVM there. You're right, it's Mapei on the front.
Well, it was TVM who did all the pacemaking on the front, but when it came down to that final corner, one of the Mapei riders just flicked around there and put himself into a good position. Now, this looks like Van Petegem. It's so difficult to see the faces on these guys today because they're absolutely creased with the cold and the dirt that's been thrown up off these Belgian roads. And in fact, you can see the difficulty of that climb of the Molenberg, but the main field still around about 50 men in the group.
Well, Max van Heeswijk was the rider also there for Mapei. and this really the last serious climb of the day. Van Petegem, his thick woolly gloves protecting his hands from the cold, although I think they're so wet now they must be freezing anyway. And he just sits on the centre of the handlebars there and rides right up the middle of the cobblestones. There he is. So Van Petegem is over the top. That looks like Max trying to get across to him, Paul, for Mappé, and there was one other rider tucked in behind him.
Well, you could see the face on Van Petegem there, Phil. He's really suffered, as every rider in this event has today, but the cold is not going to stop him because he's a Belgian rider. This is the first major event in Belgium for the year, and he wants to ride well on his home ground, and he's looking at getting a hat-trick of wins.
Well, he certainly damaged the field there, but not as much as I would have anticipated. We're probably down to no more than 50-55 riders now from the 193 who started. They're the only survivors, and we're around about 140 kilometres into the race, so we've still got quite a long way to go.
Still about 60 kilometres to go to the finish, but you can see, in fact, of all the riders who started, there's not many managed to drag themselves towards the finish line. The difficult thing about a race like the Het Volk is you're never very far away from the finish, so if you're not feeling too good, you can always take a shortcut and get yourself back to the early showers. And that climb, it's not the climb itself, as you can see, that's caused the damage. It's the flat over the top of the climb with those winds coming across the road that are causing the main field to split up once again.
Well, we've got Van Petegem and we've got Van Heeswijk, and the third rider is Lotto. It looks like the style of Joe Plankert, so they're the three leaders.
Three young riders too they've got across there, but they've only got about 50 metres advantage over the main field, and Van Heeswijk doesn't want to cooperate with these two riders because they are two of the major favourites before the start. In fact, it is Joe Plankert. What Van Heeswijk will be doing today is he will be playing the team lieutenant, sitting at the back there, making sure the brake doesn't get off the front, because I do feel today that Mappé's banking on a man like Tom Steele's winning. They're trying to keep a big group, and Steele's is still in there at the moment.
Well, it's not going to work either, because I think probably with Van Petegem and Joe Plankert, two big names clear, the other teams have chased down immediately. They've not even allowed them time to get into the rhythm. That was a serious effort by Van Petegem, and now he wants some more help from the rest of the race that they've joined in to see what they can make of it. The field, I think, has split. Well, this could be 10 or 15 riders slightly off the front here.
It has split just over the top of the Molenberg. That acceleration on the flat part, and good to see Tom Steele's was in there.
Yeah.
And this is the nervous part for these riders. Plankert there looking over his shoulder, trying to see just how far behind the rest of the group is, because they have split. You can see them there. Still, it's only about 50 yards to those remaining riders behind. A lot of TVM riders in this group as well.
Well, I really would have got on with the job here, because TVM Tristan Hoffman going around the corner there, he's riding very, very well, and they took it very cautiously over there. Is that Johan Museo at the back? It looks like it. Well, this man just will not lie down, and he looks very, very sharp indeed, because his accident last year, there was fears he would never ride his bike again.
Amazing. But this man can read the races. He's got the power, the form. He's been training all through the winter to get himself ready for the start of this season. There he is, onto the back of that split. He knew where it was going to happen, and he cruised right across to it.
Just trying to see if we got a glimpse of Frankie Vandenbroecker in this leading group, and I'm not sure he is here. There's Tom Steele's though, who was his teammate, now his rival. If they take Steele's to the line, he'll take a lot of guys to beat him, and he knows it. Number 106 there is Leon Van Bon, and rider number 23 just sitting there at the front at the moment of Fabien Duvala, one of the Belgian riders and there is Frankie Vandenbroecker, so he's in the breakaway. So this is a solid move now. I'm surprised they're not trying. Well, they are now. They seem to have sorted themselves out. They've got themselves going a bit now.
And one of the riders from Crédit Agricole.
Oh no, they're coming up, Paul. No, Vandenbroek is bringing them up. Look, Paul, he's in the chase group here.
Oh, he is too, and in fact one of the Crédit Agricole riders there, I think, was Stuart O'Grady. Now Schmiel is going off the front of this group. He realises the danger of letting that group come back up there, and this is the moment when you really do need to attack. Once the groups start to come back together, that's the ideal moment to launch a counter-attack. Again, Mappé covering the move. Schmiel has tried to go off the front, and Tom Steele's right onto his wheel.
Schmiel is a bit depressed by the whole thing at the moment. He's a superb classics rider. He has more places in the top 6 in classics, I think, than the majority of riders. Possible exception, Franco Ballerini at the moment, of the current racing boys. But it's not going to go away. It is an intriguing race, this, and clearly a lot of riders feel they have a chance of winning it, because every time they start a move, somebody else chases it and shuts it down.
Well, the man who wins this race today is going to be the man who's managed to keep himself warm for as long as possible, because it is unbelievable the weather conditions. In fact, the temperature dropping down during the course of the race today, because it's gone down to 4 or 5 degrees. And again, the attack coming from Lotto. This time it's Joe Plancart going off the front. All of these attacks, Phil, they're never getting more than 20 or 30 yards. But what it's doing is putting big pressure on the rest of the field.
So, one of the rare survivors of the Française des Jeux team tagged on to the back. Museo still watching the moves and still riding really on top form at the moment. But the rain in Belgium at this time of the year is not the best. But people like Museo, with the career he's had, he knows all about that. It's only in the latter part of a terrific career, during which time he has been a world champion, green jersey in the Tour de France. He's only started to get bad luck in the latter years, Paul. Until then, he had a virtual trouble-free career.
Yeah, I think it's one of the unfortunate things about being a top bike rider. Sometimes once Lady Luck starts to turn against you, then she stays against you for some time, and hopefully that will be the last bit of bad luck that Johan Museo has had, because he's had some very unfortunate luck in the past, and that last crash in Paris-Roubaix last year was almost fatal really for Johan Museo, and I hope he does recover and races for a couple of years, and it may well be that he'll go to the Olympic Games in Sydney in 2000 to represent Belgium, and I would think after that we'll see Johan Museo walk nice and calmly into retirement.
Like all cyclists, he'd probably want to be a television commentator as well.
Yeah, why not?
It's the easier job, isn't it? So De Walle here at the front for Lotto, and taking up the pace now, Servais Knaven, former champion of the Netherlands. First race he ever won, I think, is after he turned professional, and he became the champion of his country. There's Stewie O'Grady, still feeling good and holding his form he found in the Tour Down Under at the end of January.
Van Heeswijk also riding a very good race today. Once again at the front there, Servais Knaven putting the pressure on. Joe Plancart has done an awful lot, because he's in all of these little moves. Now I think that seems to be the tactic for Team Lotto today. Plancart is the man who's following the moves, and Andre Schmil is the man trying to instigate a small group off the front. So they're covering it and working it out together. Van Heeswijk looking very good, but he doesn't want to push too much, because he wants to make sure that the right combination of Mapei riders goes into that break, and the right combination I feel has to be Tom Steele's, because if we can keep a group of 15 or 20 riders together, then Mapei have got a great chance of winning.
Well, at the moment it looks like we've got more like a group of 50 riders have come up to the front there and regrouped. There's our gentleman from Radio Tour. Now, this is Max Van Heeswijk. Would like somebody to come and give him a hand again now. He seems, with the benefit of a new team, has really worked hard this winter to get some early form to impress the Mapei boys, because he's riding very well today. As we race towards the end now, Jesper Skibby's in there too, and I think that might have been Skibby who shot off the front, Paul, and Mapei's are chasing him.
Well, that was Skibby. Skibby's got great form. He's a good rider. He's now on a smaller team, which doesn't put too much responsibility on his shoulders, which means, in fact, Skibby can race the way he wants to. He's been in the back of the pack for some time there, and Skibby leads them round the corner there, followed by Steven de Jong, and once again, one of the riders from Mapei coming across there. This looks again like Johan Museo is trying to get in there.
Now, still trying to sort it out again. Another Mapei boy getting involved now is Daniele Nardello. A little bit of a sprinter, but it's nice to see in Belgium he's found his way to the front of the pack at this late stage of the race, because they're still trying to reshape this race. Skibby, though, as I say, going into his last season as a professional bike rider, the Great Dane. I always think of a dog when I say that, but that's exactly what he's been. And now the group here just trying to keep an eye on Wim Face, another man for Lotto. Lotto have placed a lot of men up here to do work for Andre Schmil.
They certainly have. It's strange to see, actually, Jesper Skibby riding in the Jack and Jones team. It's his second year on that squad, but for so long he was regarded as a TVM man. It really is a shame to see him with that red and white jersey on his shoulders.
But he's been developing a great team, home team Jack and Jones, starting out as a second division team, but they've scored a lot of points in the Tour Down Under with his second place overall, stage wins. They've got the King of the Mountains as well in that race with Christian Andersen, so they could well be heading up to being a first division team. Now Van den Broeke, Paul, has tried to go clear.
Well, that's amazing. Frank Van den Broeke, he's got hardly any teammates in that group at all, and he's decided to go out and put the pressure on. He's got hardly any clothes on at all to ward off this cold weather, just a thermal jacket on, a gilet, and he's opened up a very smart gap there over the rest of that group. A good timed attack.
Well, he's waited, he's watched everybody have a little dig and done nothing. He had to chase to get up to the split, he did that, and now he's trying to see what he can start himself. Remember, the breakaway is still up front, but they can't be very far ahead, and I don't know why, but we have been given no actual time checks on them at all today.
It's always difficult in conditions like this. Even Race Radio, I think, is having some difficulty keeping control over the race at the moment because of these atmospheric conditions. Johan Museeuw coming across there, Andre Schmeel nipping onto the back, and good again to see Stuart O'Grady taking advantage of that early season form of his to slip into this move here in the Het Volk. O'Grady, if it does get to the finish, would bring a serious challenge to a group like this because he's got a very fine sprint.
It just shows you the versatility of somebody like Stuart O'Grady, you know, because 3 weeks ago he was racing in degrees of 110 down in Adelaide, and now he's here in the cold and the heavy rain. His body's still giving him every bit, and he's in this chase group. And it's the same names throughout the hour or so we've watched this race, Paul, who are in the front now, and now the TVM realising that their man hasn't made it.
Well, they lost out there. They didn't have the right man in that group, and that's going to put pressure on them. We're looking here now at the big organisation. Surveys Carnarvon comes to the front. Everything today for TVM has been done for one man, and that's Peter van Petegem, the winner of the last 2 years. The big pressure, they realise a man like Frank van den Broek, Johan Museeuw and Andre Schmeel are up there, but van Petegem looks very calm. No panic at all on his face. He's just leaving it up to the team, but they're being shadowed by Tom Steele. So again, Team Mapei have played a very good card here. They've got Johan Museeuw up there, takes the pressure off the sprinter, and he just has to sit there behind the grey guard.
And it's interesting to know, Paul, that they seem to have all of their riders still in the race, TVM, which at this stage, to get them all into that lead group is says a lot for the fitness of the squad. And they're all got to the front now, and they're trying to tow what is turning out to be the remnants of the 54th Omloop Het Volk at the moment, because they're all sitting behind TVM saying thanks very much for pulling back Jean-Luc van den Broek and Andre Schmeel and everybody else up front. The gap is there, but it's not going to stay.
Well, in fact, that group of 5 riders is spreading out across the road a little bit. They don't seem to be working too well together. Van den Broek is the keenest to come to the front, and in fact there are 2 riders from Lotto up there. So Andre Schmeel has a teammate there, that's Chris Peers, who just went to the back of the group. So Lotto in the ideal position at the moment with 2 riders working here, but you can see the energy Frank van den Broek is putting into this group. In fact, of 6 riders, I didn't see Peers come across, but he's definitely there now, as is O'Grady and Johan Museeuw just coming into the picture.
And it looks to me as though they're losing the impetus here because they just can't put themselves together properly, and the TVM are very consistent in their chase down at the back. Andre Schmeel, 3rd in this event last year. And there's the breakaway, Paul, and we've at last seen them, and just in time, because I think we're going to see the chase is bringing them back. We're heading up towards Lawn and the cobble section of road, and it looks to me as though it's probably, Paul, about 35-40 seconds at the moment.
And you can see the speed in the main group though, all of the riders from TVM on the front there, and a big long line in the main field behind them. These 3 guys have survived for a long time in today's race, but it's almost over for them because very shortly they'll be pulled right back into the fold. They now know, because all the cars are being pushed forward, the gap behind them is being cleaned out by the race referees to keep the race as straight as possible. The group there with Van den Broek being pulled back into the main field because of the pressure of the TVM riders on the front, but that last acceleration has really brought an end to the breakaway of 3 riders who we've had at the front of this race for an awful long time.
Well, it looks to me as though they've been caught at just on the 40 kilometres to go point, so there's still a lot of time here left to race. No more hills ahead of the riders now. There's still a bit of slippery roads and some narrow roads though, with a chance now to rethink the whole format. Jesper Skibby riding probably his last Het Volk.
He's always ridden well in the Belgian races because on his shoulders the responsibilities of the TVM squad. Now it's the Mapei squad coming to the front now to try and organise this. Moving up there, 3, 4, 5, 6 riders from Mapei, and on the back Tom Steele. So that's obviously the order of the day for Team Mapei today. Keep the group as big as possible, keep Tom Steele's in there, but it's going to be difficult because as we come into the finish in Lokeren, there are a couple of very tricky sections of cobblestones where in the past a small breakaway of 7 or 8 riders has managed to get clear, and each time Tom Steele has always managed to miss out and end up in the back half of the main field.
Skibby, 34 years of age now, his birthday in just over a week's time, so he's going to be riding through his 35th year as he stays professional for one last time. And his dad Willie He was in the World Championships and got a bronze medal back in 1966, and Skibby really has followed in his footsteps. Had a tremendous career and been a great rider. Won some big races too, including stages in the Tour of Denmark and Tour of Spain. And I think
a great stage in the Tour de France a couple of years ago.
Right,
at the top of a hilltop finish. He jumped away and it looked as if he was about to get caught, but he held off, and as he crossed the line, the whole of the main field came by him. Look, there in second position, working for Team Mapei now, Axel Merckx. It's a great...
nice to see Axel up there in a race like this, actually.
It certainly is. It's an interesting note. There's always been a big rivalry between Frank van den Broek and Axel Merckx, because Axel Merckx, obviously the son of the great Eddy Merckx, in many of their amateur races. In fact, there was a lot of rivalry between the two riders, and it's strange to note that once Frank van den Broek left Mapei, then in fact Axel Merckx came to join them.
And last year, 10th in the Tour de France. That's all's well for the future, even though we did lose a lot of riders in last year's Tour. Merckx did ride well in the mountains. He's got a lot of his teammates around him now. Wilfred Peters is here. Peters, a strong, solid rider, usually the top domestique on the squad, but seeming to be doing a lot less work today. Maybe he's got a bit of a plan himself, because there's no real leader of the Mapei squad. They'd all love to see, of course, Johan Museeuw pull it off, but who's to know?
But it looks very much now as if this organisation is for Tom Steels. You can see Steels there just sitting on the back wheel of Max van Heesewijk, and that would be a very difficult move to beat, because if Max van Heesewijk were to lead out Tom Steels at the end of this race, then I would think not many people would come past Tom Steels. But the man with the brain in this team has got to be Johan Museeuw. He is the tactical man. He's the man who I feel took over the title of King of the Classics after the retirement of Sean Kelly, because he's been so consistent as a Classics rider. And it's going to be interesting in a month's time when we come to races like Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix to see just how that man Johan Museeuw is going to respond. But Jesper Skibby here is putting everything he can into this, heart and soul and body, trying to survive, trying to push the energy right up to keep his body warm as well, because it really is a difficult day out there. His advantage over the group, just 30 seconds at the moment, and with that organisation coming from Team Mapei, I don't think he's going to stay there for too long.
Well, I'd like him to stay there and win the race. That'd be great, great results, especially for him and his team. But it looks as though the organised behind are going to keep him up there. He's taking a lot of pressure off, strangely enough, paradoxically so, because while one team has got a solid tempo going there, the rest will hide and waiting for a counter-attack that might take them up to Jesper. It looks to be more than 30 seconds down there, but the view from the helicopter can be a little bit deceiving. That group is getting smaller though. There's only about 25-30 riders left in there now.
Bit of indecision there as we come to this dual carriageway. A couple of riders got caught out there, and they'll have a hard ride because they're not actually on the back wheel of the main field. But still, the big organisation on the front, Axel Merckx, followed by Johan Museeuw, Wilfred Peters and Nardello in there as well, and they're keeping this right in hand. All in-house today for Team Mapei. They're certainly looking for the big victory. This is one of the top teams in the world because they have consistently won races throughout the season.
But they're having to bring back the old veteran, a man who's been a pro for 13 seasons. Jesper Skibby, slightly in excess of 30 seconds the gap.
Wilfred Peters now taking up the chase on the front. I've always regarded Wilfred Peters, if we assume that Johan Museeuw took over the role of King of the Classics from Sean Kelly, I have to say that I think Wilfred Peters takes over the role of Super Domestique from Sean Yates, because they're very similar kind of riders, very strong indeed, but only seem to excel when they're working for other people.
Yeah, absolutely right. They get as much pleasure out of seeing their team leaders win as they do out of winning the odd race themselves.
What a beast on the front there. He's been at the front for quite some time now, and it's a strange mindset, a domestique. You get into a mindset, you don't think about anything, there's no tactics involved, you just come to the front and you keep turning those pedals. All you're thinking about is keeping the pace up, keeping the speed high so that there are no attacks, and working for the team. There's nothing at the back of your mind except just keeping the pressure on.
And that's what he's doing. The roads are still wet and a little bit glacial. It's still very cold and it's most unpleasant, but these are Belgian races in the spring. Not quite the spring yet, I suppose. We're just tagging on to the tail of the winter, but spring's just around the corner, we hope. And we hope for a good racing season, certainly with the spring classics coming up.
Well, this is probably springtime in Belgium, definitely, because these are the kind of days you expect in Belgium. Axel Merckx moving up into second place. It seems very much as if Johan Museeuw, just sitting there in fourth position all the time, is controlling this chase. He's actually orchestrating it, trying to keep the group nice and compact. And obviously the man in fifth place, Max van Heesewijk, there has been given the designation of looking after Tom Steels, who's lying currently in 6th. This is a great squad, well drilled, well organised, and they're looking today for the victory for Tom Steels to try and make sure that Team Mapei can have a great Belgian victory. Nardello on the front. In fact, almost apart from Max van Heeswijk, the only foreigner who slipped into this team, because it is very much the Belgian side of Mapei Quick-Step taking part in Het Volk here.
That's right, little Nardello doing his bit at the front, hoping his Belgians will take it out. I guess they've left Max near to the sprinter Tom Steels, Paul, because at least Max also is a good sprinter and would be a perfect lead-out man, I would think.
Absolutely. If you get a lead out from a man like Max van Heeswijk, he really will put him into orbit if he can. You see how he's actually shadowing him there. You've got the 4 Mapei riders on the front and then Max van Heeswijk in 5th position, and all the time you've got Tom Steels just following him like a pilot fish, because he knows that is my wheel, and when we come down to the final kilometres I'm going to stay right here, because van Heeswijk is the man who's going to keep me close to the front. But in fact Tom Steels getting a little bit swamped there by 2 of the Rabobank riders moving up round the outside.
Well, you know what they say about the Dutch. They're pretty aggressive bike riders, and they know exactly what the tactics are too, and they've got the quality in this breakaway to win it as well. In the inset there, the man who's just up the road but out of sight at the moment, Jesper Skibby of Team Home Jack and Jones, and this is his big effort now, and it's got to work, otherwise I think he'll be tagged onto the tail of the peloton when it finally picks them up, if that's the way it's going to be.
That group has definitely reduced in numbers again. You can see a lot of riders are falling away because of the cold, I think, today, and the pressure over the climbing section of this 54th Het Volk, because riders in a race like this get eliminated from the rear. There's been no major attacks. We did have that long breakaway of the 3 riders who managed to survive for an awful long time until 40 kilometers to go, but really what has happened, a lot of riders have been eliminated on the repetitive ascensions of these Flandrian climbs, and now Jesper Skibby trying to hold out, but it's so difficult on this final 40-kilometer section because it's flat all the way down to the finish line, and one team has taken the responsibility of the chase, and I think really Jesper Skibby is just holding on. He's surviving and hoping that he won't get caught, but I think really it's on the cards that soon the big Dane will be back in the main group.
Well, I don't think there's anybody in that pack to help him. I've not seen any of his teammates left in that pack, so he's going to have no friends back there. And there are so many good teams back there with their team leaders intact that I don't see this possible. But it would be nice, because certainly there's no more hills to break him up. We do have a nasty cobble stretch of road to come.
And once they start to approach that section of cobbles, the main field will notch it up a little faster as well, because they'll want to go into the front of the group in the first 4 or 5 positions for that section of cobblestones. And again, Wilfred Peters, you can hardly recognise his face there. The cold has really left its traces on the faces of all of these riders there. They've really survived. This has been a tough event, and there's one of the beautiful castles in the area just outside of Ghent that we're going past now, and that's a great place to go and visit if you want to.
So I wouldn't mind owning that. It's quite pleasant, isn't it?
Looks like your house anyway.
Absolutely magnificent. The race turning their backs to it now, though, as they concentrate on bringing back a Dane in Belgium, who is still up front, and he can't be much out of our picture either, because this race behind is very, very quick right now. Mapei doing all of the work, and I'm not quite sure as to why, other than possibly they'll bring the race up for a Tom Steels sprint victory.
Another section of cobblestones, probably not even marked in the race book, where Jesper Skibby, looking over his shoulder, he's got a fair idea that the main field will soon be boring down upon him. Looking back there, they've taken all the cars out of that group, and still 5 Mapei riders on the front looking after the man in the Belgian champions jersey, Tom Steels. Mapei definitely doing the job this afternoon. They've decided this is going to be the race that we'll keep together, but I do feel that they're doing a little bit too much too soon, because when we do come to the strategic section of cobblestones towards the end, these guys have done an awful lot of work, and it's then going to be up to their man Tom Steels to defend himself on the cobbles. And in the last couple of editions of Het Volk, he's never really managed to do it. Well, that's it for Jesper Skibby.
I think it is, and we're around about 25 kilometres from the finish here too. This is Lawn, and in fact he's caught, and Tom Steels back in the thick of it. He won the race back in 1996, but Van Petegem took over a couple of years now, and Van Petegem must not be we must not forget he's still part of this group, and will probably be quite pleased that he isn't having to use his TVM boys right now, because there's plenty of volunteers from Mapei to set the pace.
plenty of volunteers in the shape of Wilfred Peters once again on the front.
Steam engine.
He's unbelievable in second position there. Johan Museeuw keeping a very good eye on Tom Steels, making sure that Steels is at the front. You see, Steels has never yet been into the wind. He's saving himself right at the front of the pack here, keeping himself nice and comfortably in position to the front of this main pack, but never actually using very much energy. Again on the left hand side, there's Vandenbroek moving up once again to the front. Frank Vandenbroek, who placed that searing attack some while ago, but today trying to come to the front, because now we're approaching what is going to be very shortly another section of cobbles, which is why you can see everybody moving
like
up around the outside. This is the moment when the next section of cobbles could split the race.
My goodness me, it was a bit slippy there. The riders weren't too sure on the tight turn. I thought we were flicking onto the cobbles. It wasn't to be, but I thought Vandenbroek had told his teammate to bring him up to the front there to launch an attack, and they lost the track a little bit, and Peters has kept his place, and nobody will beat him. He's a great bike rider too.
Well, Vandenbroek moved himself up nice and comfortably there. He's come up to the wheel there of Johan Museeuw. He realises Museeuw is the man with the brain, the tactical knowledge. Yeah. He knows exactly where he wants to be at any instance in this race, Het Volk. And in fact, because of that confusion there, Tom Steels has moved back 5 or 6 places, so he lost it going around that corner there. But these races and these roads in Belgium are so scary, because you can see at the side of the road, although they're racing on a concrete surface at the moment, the side of the road there is cobblestones, and that is actually where a lot of people park their cars. And the danger in Belgium is when you're looking to try and ride out of the wind, you're trying to protect yourself, you ride too close to the end, and there's a little ridge down the side of that road there, and the riders call it Death Valley. And if you get that, it's very, very easy to cause a crash, and because you can't flick yourself back onto the road, and that's what a lot of the crashes are caused by in the races in Belgium.
Well, they're all making a right-hand turn here. Still the Mappé boys are on the front. General regrouping at the back. Nobody under too much pressure at the moment, because there's been a slight slackening in the pace. And they know now they're approximately 20 kilometres from the finish, about 12 miles left to race, and the riders now are going to have to work out, can they split up this field, or are they going to hand it to Tom Steels on a place, or maybe Peter van Petegem for a third year.
Well, we're getting close now to the section of cobbles. The number of Mappé riders on the front there has certainly decreased. Leading the round, Wilfred Peters. Second place, Johan Museeuw. Third is Tom Steels, and following that trio of Mappé riders, an ex-Mappé rider, Frank Vandenbroek.
Gently does it at the back. Oh, very gently does it. Almost overshot the bend there, that Cofidis rider. I thought perhaps he had a flat tyre, but he's got himself going again. It's not Vandenbroek.
Could well be Philippe Gaumont. A little bit overgeared as well. They're trying to get himself going
rider,
again.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Camera at the back there, just checking out to see if it was.
And that looks like one of our early breakaways there, who's now in trouble. Roosens, I think it is, who's done well to hold on to this break for as long as he has done.
He certainly has survived and stayed in the front at Het Volk, but at the end of the day, these guys got a lot of publicity for their teams. That was a short section of cobblestones. There's still one very long section of cobblestones to go before we get down to the finish in Lokeren there. And I think Philippe Gaumont, who went off the back there, is going to have a hard time getting up to this group.
But he came around very... and there was almost a flick of a back wheel there. I thought there was trouble. Now we're onto the cobblestones again. This is going to be the last real chance to hammer home an advantage here. And Peters is accelerating again. Tom Steels, though, now, Paul, is taking a much, much closer notice of his teammate and has moved very quickly up towards him.
Peters is a beast, I have to tell you. He's come to the front there. He knows exactly who's on his wheel. He just looked under his arm there to see if he could see the shape and colours of the Belgian national champion, Tom Steels. Steels is there, and all he wants to do is get across this section of cobbles as quickly as possible and try and explode the group of riders behind him, because now Wilfred Peters, despite the fact that in the past he's won a Wevelgem himself, is now thinking about the team. He's thinking just about Tom Steels. Up there into third position, another Mappé rider, and it's working because there is a split in the group there. There's about 6 or 7 riders going clear, 8 riders going clear, 3 Mappé riders in the group. At the back there's been a bit of a problem there. One of the riders from Lampreys had a difficult time there. That's Zebgini Spruk, who's gone off the back, and I don't think he'll be seeing the group again. No, he obviously overshot that bend and went down, I think, judging by where his sunglasses are in his mouth. And there has been a split at the back, because this is caused by that fall, I think.
And the guys just slipping over. Is that Jesper Skibby who's coming off the back as well? So Jesper's trapped at the back. He's had his moment. I said earlier he wouldn't get a second shot at it because the race has gone under pressure at the front now, and I wonder who's caused it all. Certainly Peters, certainly Steels. Vandenbroek is there, Van Petegem is there. This is looking like a very serious move indeed.
And Carnarvon coming across as well. So this is going to be interesting. There's a couple of riders from Mapei, there's a couple of riders from TVM, and Frank Vandenbroek is on the front, putting the pressure on there. Right on his wheel, one of the riders from Lotto, and I think Andre Schmeel is in that group as well.
Now, any sign of Johan Museo being in there? Because this is could well be the decisive move now.
I think in fact that's Museo in front there. The pressure was put on by Wilfred Peters going into that section of cobblestones, and Vandenbroek was actually recovering there because he was left behind a little bit on the section of cobblestones, and the group now swelling to around about 9 men.
Well, we are now being told, in fact, there are now 20 kilometres to go. Surveys Carnarvon at the back, the former champion. His team captain is up here as well, the winner for the last 2 years, Peter Van Petegem. Andre Schmeel is here, Museo is here. I think Joe Plankett has also got himself up here. We know that Steels and Peters are here because we saw them launch the attack. This is really the men who've made all the race are now up here at the front, and that is Museo now sitting at the back, number 15. What a shrewd operator, Paul. He just reads these things.
He knows exactly where he wants to be at every stage of this race this afternoon. Every time they've come to a section of cobblestones, he's flicked his way to the front, got onto the cobblestones in 4th or 5th position, and now he's sitting at the back of this group. He's got a man who's gone off the front there, I think is Wilfred Peters, and that's why in fact Johan Museo has come to the back here, sitting back just to see how the race develops. Surveys Carnarvon there in front, leading them around, and you can see how dangerous these corners are. You come off a section of tarmac and onto a section of cobblestones.
Well, it's like riding on sheet ice at the moment. They're so wet, and you've got to take a little bit of chance, of course, and it's always the Belgians and the Dutch who are so good at controlling the bike under these conditions. There's Andre Schmeel. He's a Belgian now. He was in fact the last champion of the old Soviet Union back in the early 90s. Then he became a Moldavian, and now he's a Belgian, and he's now giving them some pain here because I think this should be the winning move. After all, we've got the guys up front who matter now, and the team should be turning off at the back.
Well, sitting in this group as well is Peter Van Petegem. A little bit further back, he too is looking to try and get himself that hat-trick, but at the moment the pressure is always being put on at the front by Wilfred Peters, and that was an excellent move there by Andre Schmeel. Schmeel is looking for a victory here in this race, and that's why he's gone off the front. At the back, Johan Museo seems quite happy to sit there. I think he's just waiting to see how the chase and the operations at the front of this group develop, and he's trying to save a little bit for the finish.
They can't blame him. He'll be unsure of his form as well after almost a year out. He started to race towards the end of last year just to get his legs turning over, but obviously after a winter of work he's now come out with serious intent. He's got his team sprint man up front in Tom Steels. He's got the team strong man up front in Wilfred Peters. So why should he work at the moment? They should keep a third man fresh as they can. That's his thoughts. He's tagged on the back. Lotto have done well. They've got looking like 3 riders up here, Paul. We know that Plankett is here, Schmeel is here, but they've got a third helper on board as well.
And Mapei done excellently too, because they too have got 3 riders. The lone man in that group is Frank Vandenbroek, and once again that's the disadvantage of moving to a team like Cofidis. Cofidis is a team that will ride well when we go to the Tour de France later in the year, but for Vandenbroek he finds himself, and he will find himself throughout I think all of the classic season, isolated when it comes to the crucial moments of these races. That's the disadvantage of moving away from a team like Team Mapei, because Mapei have got 3 riders in there at the moment, and each one of those riders has got a great chance of winning, although I don't think the win is going to come to Wilfred Peters today, because he's just done so much work at the front of this group, and he's moved himself into 2nd position there, letting the Lotto rider in front set the pace again over this small road.
I think it's Chris Peers actually who's got himself up front there to do some pacemaking. He's been riding pretty well. The only other Lotto man in the thick of the action was Wim Face, but I think that's Peers. That breakaway is going clear of the main field now. That's why they've allowed this flotilla of motorcycles in. What a colourful bunch they look to today, as they tuck in behind to get the shots of what may well be the winning break now. Let's have a look. It's opened very quickly, and really that bunch has turned off, hasn't it?
It certainly has. There's no real big team who's going to chase. TVM have been the team at the front doing a lot of the work, as have Mapei. So one wonders which team has got the strength to try and pull back that leading group of 9 riders. There are a couple of green jerseys there from the Crédit Agricole team, but I would think after the kind of riding that Stuart O'Grady's got, Crédit Agricole don't have the power left in their machine to pull back this leading group of 9, because most of these guys are the favourites for the victory today. We've got Vandenbroek there sitting 3 from the back, Van Petegem right on the back with his teammate there, Servais Knaven. Knaven will be trying to look after Van Petegem when we come down to the sprint finish. And obviously a man like André Schmeel, I would think, will be looking for the late attack, because Schmeel, when it comes down to a sprint with riders like this, will be trying to make sure that he can survive by getting clear towards the end of the race. Another section of cobblestones, and I'm sure if we could get to the front of this group again, it would be the shape of Wilfred Peters on the front, and a little split again appearing there as we accelerate over these cobbles.
Well, unfortunately our brave cameraman has got himself at the back now, and until these roads widen out a bit, oh well, looks like we've got a forward shot here now, so we do have a camera up front.
And it is, in fact, Wilfred Peters on the front.
It is indeed, and being trailed by his sprinter Tom Steels, who isn't helping him at all. But I'm sure if he wins this, he'll be the first to say thanks a lot, Wilfred, for another fantastic day of pacemaking. And there are no hills over these last few kilometres, Paul, but this constant change of direction and these long stretches of cobbled, it does add to a nice variety for the bike riders. And of course, it has been a very good race this year.
It certainly has. It's been an excellent race, and there's been a lot of attacking and a lot of Belgian riders to the front, because this is a race which in the past has been dominated by Belgians, but in recent years the Dutch have really come up there and proved that they too feel very much at home in a race like Het Volk. And I do not know whether I agree with the change to a place like Lokeren. I always felt that it should have been Ghent as it always was, and it is very difficult with having the hills so far from the finish. But today, with these sections of cobblestones in there, the sections of cobblestones have become the strategic part in the latter closing kilometres of this race. Still sitting on the back, Van Petegem.
I like Lokeren because in one of my very few cycling great moments I finished 3rd in a race there. And I couldn't tell you where the finishing line was now. It's a long time ago.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's why the organisers moved the race back to there.
Thank you very much, you're very kind. Right, back with the leaders of what is the 54th edition of Het Volk. Het Volk, by the way, is the name of the sponsoring newspaper. Simply means the people, or the folk. And this has been a very, very good bike race today. It's giving us a nice uplift for the start of the long cycling season. Still to come, of course, Paris-Nice and Tirreno Adriatico and the first classic Milan-San Remo. Then the World Cup will be upon us.
Van Petegem looking very nervous, coming up alongside his teammate Servais Knaven here, a former champion of Holland. In fact, Peter Van Petegem, a former amateur champion of Belgium. A very good rider, turned professional for PDM, and then kind of lost his way a little bit and ended up on a small team Trident before moving forward. And I think now that he's moved up to TVM is developing into a very good rider, always in the thick of the action when it comes to these tough semi-classics like the Het Volk.
TVM team now called TVM Farm Friet, which is co-sponsor, which is a chip factory almost, because they eat plenty of chips in Holland and Belgium. Leon van Bon, now he's missed out and left to do something about it or not. He's called up a little bit of help from his Rabobank team, but I think they're the big losers today, Paul.
They certainly are. There wasn't a Rabobank rider in the leading group of 9, and Max van Heeswijk very happy to sit on the wheel of his former teammates there. Van Heeswijk riding to the front now, riding for Team Mapei, is sitting there in 3rd, 4th position, just leaving it up to his old teammates and probably casting his mind back to last year and thinking, God, if I was still riding for Rabobank, I'd have to be doing this.
Yes, he's probably quite relieved now that after all his hard work, and he did plenty of it, Max van Heeswijk today, has seen that the 3 men he wanted get in that breakaway. And so he'll be relaxing now, job done, and just watch these wheels as they try to bring back the breakaway, which I don't think they have a chance of doing now. The gap has gone out to almost a minute.
Very difficult indeed, because all of those riders in the front group feel that they've got a great chance of winning. 3 riders from Mapei, 3 riders from TVM, so they will work in earnest to make sure that that group survives all the way to the finish. And this group of riders behind is down to around about 20 unities now, and I would think not very many guys in that group really want to go to the front. They're just hoping to survive this Het Volk and get to the finish and get to the showers as quickly as possible.
Yeah, nobody helping. They're all sitting line astern on the Rabos. This sponsorship, by the way, out of Holland, apart from their top flight 1st Division Pro team, they have an elite amateur team, they have juniors, they have school children, and they come right through from the very basics to the top team. And you can imagine that the riders on the up-and-coming teams, their one ambition is to be like these boys and ride the big classic races, and why not?
Looking back from the helicopter there, it looked very much as if that gap had come inside the 1 minute. So the Rabobank obviously having a certain effect on the advantage of this group. Wilfried Peters there, his face really marked by the cold weather today, and Andre Schmil now taking a greater interest in operations at the front of this group.
Well, Schmil looks pretty cool as well. And he's relying on the pacemaking by his teammates. And in fact, his teammate there, it was Wim Face, it wasn't Chris Pearce, so it's Face who got across. Because there's 3 Lottos in this breakaway, and they're banking on Andre to finish it off. 3rd last year.
I have to say, these are awful races when you ride in these weather conditions. Your fingers start to get so cold, it's very difficult to actually change gear at a moment like this, and you try and find a gear that's comfortable and keep your fingers away from the gear levers because it is so difficult. You can see the faces on these riders are so marked. There's an attack going. Johan Museeuw.
Yeah, he's gone, and he sat at the back, watched and waited. There's 1 or 2 heads flicked there. They saw it as Museeuw. And now the counter-attack has come, because this man they rate, even though he missed all of last season with injury.
Well, what a man. Johan Museeuw is definitely back. He waited for the moment when everyone was starting to look at each other, teams was talking tactics, and Museeuw knew that was the moment, a moment of hesitation. There is always a moment like that. Carnarvon now has given up. Schmil takes up the chase. Look at the move now by Tom Steels. He's moved right onto the back wheel of Schmil. He's going to do everything to make sure that nobody chases Johan Museeuw.
Well, he's won most races in Belgium, but he's never won this one, Johan, as he now tries to go. But not surprisingly, Paul, just about everybody with a chance in this race has jumped on him.
Another move now. Vandenbroek goes down the outside. They've pulled back Johan Museeuw, and now the next attack is coming. This kid has got so much acceleration. He's hardly got out of the saddle now, and he's picking his way through the motorbikes. They're using them to his advantage, and now Vandenbroek has gone clear, and that is a good move by him.
Well, he's waited till they've softened up in the counter-attack. Now Schmil wants them to start chasing. He's realised the seriousness. Nobody going. Yes, he's called his teammates up as Andre Schmil to try and bring them back.
Well, I tell you what, the Lotto team won't be too happy with having Frank Vandenbroek off the front, because I know even though it looked as if there was a Mappe rider trying to get across there, and in fact it is Peters who's come across. He's the man who's worked on the front all the time. When he's seen the danger of his former teammate going off the front, he's nailed him back. And
a big deep breath, and he's in there. But that's incredible. Now we've got 2 riders clear, Mappe and the Cofidis. That means Lotto and TVM are going to have to do the counter-attack. We've got Servais Carnarvon on the front here.
I'll tell you, one man who's not done an awful lot of work in this group over the last few kilometres is Joe Plancard. He's been sitting back, leaving it up to Schmil, leaving it up to Face to do all of the work, and he now is in an ideal position. But the brake has gone off the front, the 2 riders, Frank Vandenbroek and Wilfried Peters, so that puts the pressure on TVM to nail them back.
And 7 chases 2. And the wind coming in from the top left-hand corner of our screen. They've got a gap, Paul. The chase is on behind, but it's just seems to be locked at the same distance at the moment.
Well, after a race like this, it is so difficult to nail it back quickly. They've just got to hope that they can eat into that advantage metre by metre, just pull them back slowly. Vandenbroek completely on his own. He knows now that he's got to put everything into the success of this group, because nobody's going to counter-attack if he gets caught, because he doesn't have any teammates to help him now. The advantage is still looking pretty good. They go over that motorway bridge, and they realise then that they don't have too far to go to the finish. We're not very far now from Lokeren, and another section of cobblestones.
And it looks as though Wilfried Peters is still playing the policeman. He's not helping Vandenbroek at all. I think he still hopes that Museeuw and Steels will come back up here.
Well, he's done a lot of work. He won't have the acceleration. He won't have the power in his legs to do anything against Frank Vandenbroek. And now it's turned the tables a little bit, because he's on the defence now rather than on the attack. He'll be hoping that he can just sit there behind Vandenbroek, recuperate a little bit before they get to the finish line, and also hope that the group behind, powered by TVM now, will bring his sprinter up, Tom Steels. Steels again riding to the front of that group in 2nd position there, right on the wheel of, I presume, one of the riders from TVM, who must be putting the pressure on to try and pull this back.
Looks as though Wim Face is having a bit of trouble at the back there now. Just gone under the 10 kilometres to go. That's only 6 miles to the finish, you know. We may have seen the winning move here. and Wilfred Peters, who's been the workhorse of the race, has got himself in it, and is not offering any assistance at all to the man who started off with great form last year, Paul, Frank van den Broek. He won Paris-Nice, he also won Ghent-Wevelgem, second in Flèche-Wallonne, sixth in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, had a tremendous start to the Spring Classics last year as well.
He's a very good rider. Everybody says this could well be the Belgian that they've been waiting for, the new man to walk into the tyre marks of Eddy Merckx. He's riding like a true champion. It's very difficult to ride when you don't have support in races like this, and he has been completely isolated, although in the early part of the race today, Philippe Gaumont did a lot of work for him, and now Team Mapei have gone on to the defence. It looks now as if Joe Plancard has come to the front to put some serious pressure on the front of that leading group, and they're starting to nail back the two attackers now.
But you see how difficult it is, and all this just on one man, because Peters is sitting there and Van den Broek is setting the pace, and they really are at the limit of their effort now, I think, as they come towards what is, what are we, 196 kilometres, 197 kilometres covered now, so those legs at this time of the year must be just about on their limit.
This is the final section of cobblestones. This is the section of cobblestones where the race has been decided over the last couple of years. This is where the breakaway has gone. They've gone away from a group of 20 or 30 riders, and today Frank van den Broek attacked before they got to the cobblestone sections. Immediately after that attack by Johan Museeuw, who today has proven that he's back to the top of world cycling, and their advantage is still hovering. It's 20-30 metres.
Yeah.
There's only one man chasing on the cobblestone sections, and I'm pretty sure that was in fact Joe Plancard, but he hasn't managed to nail them back, and their advantage is still holding. But I think, Phil, they're going to pull them back now. They have to on this long straight road. The chase will get organised, and then they're sure to pull those two riders back into the fold.
Well, Plancard wants some help. The TVM guys are going to give him some as Plancard swings off now. It's in the end, Smill's going to have to do some work himself. It looks like Smill also moving up, but they're going to have to organise themselves very quickly, because we're going into the last few kilometres of what has been an extraordinary race today. And this man, I'd love to see the face now of Wilfred Peters, and there it is. He's taken a few. He doesn't exactly look tired though, Peters, and I'm just wondering if he might pull one off over on Van den Broek, Paul.
Well, psychologically he'll be feeling a little stronger now, because he knows he just has to sit behind Frank van den Broek. He's got two very good men behind in Tom Steels and in Johan Museeuw, so he will sit there, and that will put a lot of psychological pressure on the young Belgian. 24 years of age, he's been professional since '94, and he will now realise, he knows Wilfred Peters, they've raced together on Team Mapei for a long time, and he knows how difficult it is if you try and drag a man to the finish. But there's a certain amount of disorganisation coming to that group behind, and nobody's really chasing, and their advantage now has gone out to around about 10 seconds.
Well, surely if Van den Broek continues to pace Peters right to the line, Peters is going to take him in the sprint, because he must be feeling a bit pressure. Somebody's turned the screw a bit tighter at the front. It could well be Van Petergem himself who's gone up to the front now. Can add on to the other man in this breakaway. And still hanging in there at the back is Wim Face of Lotto, or has he just cracked? He's finding it a bit difficult right now.
Well, he's done a lot of work for the team, not thought about himself,
yeah.
But you can see moving up into second place. Marking that move there is Tom Steels. In fact, I think Steels believes exactly what you feel, that in fact Wilfred Peters has got a good chance of winning if the two stay clear, because Steels is actually adopting tactics to try and slow down the success of this seven-man chase.
And there's a bit of panic setting in there now as everybody's sort of trying to scrabble to the front. There's no organisation. This is now Knaven, and it looks as though the gaps are still here. Wim Face is just hanging on to the tail end of the whip, and it looks as though his teammates are also getting a little bit tired now.
Joe Plancard there has moved to the back of this group. Plancard has tried over the section of cobblestones to pull it back. On the front there will be Andre Schmiel. Schmiel, always a man who does never give up at all. He's got his arm up there. Come on, boys, there's three of us. We've got to chase down Van den Broek. Jean-Luc's not going to be too happy if his nephew wins tonight, because there's still a bit of animosity in the family circle there.
You know, this is showing signs that they might win this race, because they are flat out at the moment. They are not organised, and I'm not so sure anybody here has the legs left to bring that breakaway back, and they're hanging just in front of them, annoyingly close, and they can't get to them, and there's a bit of panic back here now.
Look at the work there by Mapei. Johan Museeuw there waiting for the acceleration to come, moving himself up into second place. That is having an effect of breaking down any organisation, and immediately Museeuw moved into second. Tom Steels moved into third. They're slowing this down because they feel that Wilfred Peters is the man who could beat the young upstart Frank van den Broek.
And that gap has opened now. It is open to about 10 or 15 seconds. There is panic behind, and they are not getting themselves organised. There are two passengers in as much as Museeuw and Steels, This man is streamlined and riding like he is a man possessed today. I've never seen him once look around to Wilfred Peters and say, give me a hand. He's just going for it. He must be very, very confident.
Great position on a bike as well, very far back over the saddle, the kind of rider with an awful lot of power. You can see he gets low down. I think he would make an excellent pursuit rider. He's got a great track position, and this man now is trying to recuperate. Psychologically, Wilfred Peters in second place has the responsibility for Team Mapei to win this race. He's got two men behind who've got confidence in him. He's been given his chance, regarded as a great domestique, but today he has to try and win this race. He's sitting on the wheel of Frank van den Broeke, allowing van den Broeke to do all the pacemaking. But look at the face on Peters. That is real tough day, but he's starting to recover. The glint coming back into his eyes. For a Belgian to win Het Volk, it's almost second best to winning the Tour of Flanders.
Well, if these two stay away, we'll be certain of that, that's for sure. As both riders now heading to the finish, both from Belgium. And the Cofidis rider, Frank van den Broeke, is now primarily a French speaker too, has never looked for any help from his compatriot here. He knows that in fact Peters would like to see the return of the chase, and here they are. But I'm not so sure about Museo anymore now. He's sitting also at the back. We know that Wim Face is just about going to hang on to this group, if he does hang on to this group. So he's going to be no help in the chase down. Steels won't help in the chase down. Paul, this is showing all the signs of a success now.
This looks very much as if nobody's really got the will and the desire to organise the chase. I'm surprised really that the Lotto boys can't get themselves together. But the big problem is they've got two of their leaders in the group. They've got Planckaert and they've got Schmiel. Schmiel is thinking about the possibility of attacking on his own towards the end. Planckaert is now thinking about his sprint. So that takes away the ability for those guys to chase. It's now TVM. And you know, all the time, Steels is coming up there in the red, yellow and black jersey of the champion of Belgium. He's doing all the work as we go under the banner now. 5 kilometres left to go to the finish.
5 short kilometres, and it's nice to see that Peter van Petegem has got himself in more or less the decisive move yet again in Het Volk, having won it for the past 2 years. But I think now his chances have just gone through the rain and out the window, because that breakaway I don't think is going to come back now. They've just all shut down, they're looking at each other and they've said that's it, the leaders are off and up the road. And you have to hand it to Van den Broeke, because that was touch and go for a few kilometres.
It certainly was. I was convinced after the cobblestone section they were going to come back. But now you've got Johan Museo on the front. Lotto's team manager, Jean-Luc Van den Broeke. Come on, boys. Chase down my nephew. We've got to pull him back. After all, he did have a contract with Lotto, and when he actually walked away on the 1st of April a couple of years ago to sign up with Team Mapei. Van den Broeke, as you said, Phil, he hasn't looked over his shoulder once at Wilfred Peters, but he realises the law is the law, and in fact out on the road there he knows that Team Mapei will be expecting Wilfred Peters to sit on his wheel, and he's never once asked him to come to the front to work.
The kings of the classics, Mapei, they don't really have candidates for big stage race victories, but they certainly know how to ride these classic races around the world, and they've got the team to deliver the goods as well. And it looks as though the visit by Jean-Luc Van den Broeke has forced poor old Wim Face to get to the front, but there can't be much in those legs now. He's just gone under the 4K banner to go, which is 2.5 miles, and they must be a half a kilometre ahead now.
I think the gap now is stretched out to about 25 seconds, and you can see there is no organisation in this chase at all. They've not got the energy. The fact that Wim Face has come to the front after being dropped shows that he's just recovered really because the group slowed down and he managed to get himself onto the back. He's only gone to the front with the last little bit of energy that he's got in his body, because team manager Jean-Luc Van den Broeke came up alongside there shouting at the riders, come on, you can't let this race disappear from us. We're in the closing kilometres. You've been on the bike now for nearly 5 hours, just a bit more.
Well, there's the pan from the helicopter, and it is a long way now because those few vital hesitations have caused this to open. Wilfred Peters has probably had a look over his shoulder, knows now it's all down to him, as it looks as though he's making ready for the sprint.
Just doing up his jacket. I thought he was going to take his jacket off there for the sprint.
Late for that, wasn't
it? He's obviously just making sure everything's nice and tight to make sure that nothing happens when we come. Look at the position of Van den Broeke there. He's got his hands right over the handlebars. A lot of these riders still trying to adopt that low profile clip-on position, which has been banned by the international governing body, but all of the riders seem to like it. They're all trying to adopt it, and it's a shame really the UCI have banned those clip-on bars, because at the end of the day these riders will still adopt that position even though though the bars are not there. That is the big long road in front, Phil, and the winner is going to come from those front two men.
Absolutely. Jean-Luc Van den Broek or Wilfred Peters. Many would say Wilfred Peters has been the man of the race, been such a great domestique riding for the others. Now it's down to him. But on the other hand, you cannot fault, as we go under 2 kilometres to go, the effort that's coming out of Jean-Luc Van den Broek. And at last, he takes a real long hard look over his shoulder and another one to make sure. He will see that long straight road which we have just seen, and he won't see anybody coming back now. Just over a mile to go to the finish. How's he going to deal with Peters now? Well,
it's going to be difficult. These two men know each other. They probably shared a room together when they were on Team Mapei, so he will know exactly the strengths and weaknesses of Wilfred Peters. He looked over his shoulders there as they went over that bridge to see just how far back the rest of that group was, to give himself some confidence, and now he can start to ride a bit more tactically. Over the last 10 kilometres, it's really been all out, full power for Frank van den Broek, and what he's thinking about now is, how am I going to win this? How am I going to outfox Wilfred Peters? Because every bike rider in Belgium has a good sprint, and he realises you can't drag somebody to the finish. The advantage there, I make it on my clock, about 30 seconds to the chasing group of 7 riders now, and there's no chase at all because Museo is up into second place. They're just making sure that they shut down, and it's now going to be one or the other of these two men we're looking at, Phil. And again, Van den Broek checking over his shoulders to see how far behind that group of 7 are.
Into Loughran now, 45 wins under his belt. He's had 2 wins already this year, by the way, Van den Broek. He started off with the opener, the Grand Prix Marseillaise, and then he won a stage of the Ruta del Sol. And now 1 kilometre to go, Paul, and he's starting to worry about the presence at last of Wilfred Peters.
Peters putting his arm up there. Somebody was shouting to him from the side of the road, but now it's going to be a very difficult sprint for Van den Broek. I'm sorry, I can't work, I'm not allowed to. That's exactly what he's saying. He said the rules are the rules, you know them. I've got Museo behind, I've got Schmiel, I've got Museo and Steels. Those are the 2 guys I have to wait for, so I'm sorry Frank, it's all up to you.
But the thing is that Van den Broek, even despite his tender years, he knows exactly what to do here. He's checked the distance behind, he knows they're not going to come back now. We're looking at 35-40 seconds. He doesn't want to lead out Peters, so he stopped racing here to try and get alongside him. Peters, with the massive experience career he's had, is making sure that Van den Broek stays right in front of him.
Peters now is trying to force Van den Broek to start the sprint in first place. He wants to come off his wheel. The main group now coming under the 1 kilometre flag. They're about 500 metres behind, and Van den Broek playing perfectly, keeping an eye on Peters. He's tempting him, trying to push him to make the move first, but you know what? Peters is too good for that. He will not fall into this trap, and he will force Van den Broek to lead out the sprint.
And one thing's for sure, Peters isn't going to give it to Van den Broek as a present for all the work he's just done. He is looking for the win here. Van den Broek knows it. It can't be very long now. 200 metres to go, and still they haven't started sprinting. So Van den Broek is going to make Peters start the sprint. Peters comes up on his shoulder and starts the sprint, but there isn't a lot of kick in those legs, because look at the lively, youthful legs of Van den Broek. It is going to be a formality despite the stage racing, the pace making he's done. He comes clear here. Peters sits up. Jean-Luc Van den Broek's nephew, Frankie Van den Broek, gets the victory, and he's just ahead and will be in the same time as Wilfred Peters. The race now for 3rd place. Now, the reason for Peters was to try and get Steels the victory. Steels is going to prove he would have been the best, but now he's going to have to settle the 3rd place. The man on his shoulder there is Schmiel, and Plankett is just behind his teammate Schmiel. And they come in very, very black and bedrabbled. I think Johan Museo got 6th place there, Paul, but there's your winner.
Great move by this young man, 24 years of age, and he rode like a martyr there. Tactically, he played it perfectly. He slowed down in the last kilometre only, kept a very good eye over his shoulder to see where the rest of that group was, and he still had the youthful explosion as he came up the line to put a big gap between himself and Wilfred Peters, who, if he hadn't had to do so much work for Team Mapei, would have pushed him a lot closer than that. But Frank van den Broek is going to be endeared by the Belgians for this victory.
Absolutely. Win number 3 of the season for him, and the first classic in the Northern Hemisphere. There's a huge trophy, and it is a big trophy, though it can't be that heavy. He's holding it with one hand. As we look back at Loughran and what has been a remarkable 54th circuit of Het Volk, we hope you've enjoyed it. For Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying until the next time.